Hello all! Welcome back to the Knowledge Tower, where we investigate the science behind the Bionicle legend. Over the course of Bionicle's run, the number of Matoran stated to inhabit the island city of Metru Nui has fluctuated somewhat. The first concrete number we got was seen on the Ministry of Metru Nui website back in 2004. This website was written from an in-universe perspective as a promotional guide to tourism in Metru Nui, and as part of it, it gave statistics on the city's population. It quoted the population to be a mere 1,000 Matoran, giving the city a very small population indeed compared to cities here on Earth. In previous videos, we have calculated that Metru Nui is roughly the same size as Dallas in the USA in terms of land area, and for comparison, that city had a population of 1.3 million people as of the 2022 census. Other sources have increased on this number, with both the Metru Nui City of Legends guidebook and books such as Bionicle Adventures 3 The Darkness Below stating that the population of the city was in the thousands rather than just 1,000, though they don't give a precise number. Greg Farshti has also been vague on this in the past, confirming that the population is in the multiple thousands, but never settling on anything definitive. This was always way too imprecise for me. Sure, the population is in the thousands, but that leaves us with a range from as small as 2,000 to as big as 999,999. That's quite the big difference. In this video, we are going to try and narrow that number down considerably. Now, long-time viewers of this channel might be thinking, haven't we covered this question before? Back in my second ever video for the Knowledge Tower, one where I hadn't quite figured out how to properly mix audio yet, I calculated a possible population for the city by working backwards from definitions of village populations in our world and applying that to the 6 villages of Metru Nui, whose inhabitants originally came from Metru Nui. In that video, I settled on there being 15,000 Matoran in the city, a big improvement from the 1,000 given on the tourism site, but still pretty small compared to Earth cities. I'm no longer happy with the methodology I used in that video. It was far too reliant on earthly definitions and didn't really use actual evidence from the Bionicle canon. So, for this video, I've decided to take another crack at it, this time making sure that my methods are firmly rooted in what we see in the story. The inspiration for this actually came about as part of my work on this year's Bionicle Day video for the height of the Colosseum, specifically the section regarding the Aquilini Field. As per its entry on BS01, this stadium had enough seating to host the entire population of the city, and that got me thinking. If I could work out the exact capacity of the stadium, then that in turn would give us a much more reliable figure for the city's population. But how would I even begin to calculate that? Luckily, I had already determined the size of the stadium as part of my last video on the Colosseum. By using pixel measurements from both the official map of the city and shots from Bionicle 2 Legends of Metru Nui, I determined that the stadium was 702.8 metres wide and 476.98 metres tall, with the Aquilini Field itself being 441.76 metres wide and taking up the same area as 73 American football fields. For the sake of time, I won't redo those calculations here, but please do check out the original video linked above if you want a refresher. By using this same shot from the last video and some more pixel counts, I was able to get some specific numbers for the seats around the Aquilini Field. I found that the height of the seating area from the top of the outer wall of the Aquilini Field to the bottom of the telescreens was 790 pixels. At 0.438 meters per pixel, that equates to 346.02 meters tall. Next, taking this top-down shot from Bionicle 3 Web of Shadows, I was also able to find that the depth of the seating area was 150 pixels from the edge of the Aquilini Field to the back wall. Some more maths and measures found that a pixel equates to around 0.76 meters in this shot, so that 150 pixels represent 114.59 meters of depth. So, the seating area is 346.02 meters tall and 114.59 meters deep. That's quite a large difference. By plugging in those numbers into this trigonometry equation, that gives us a steepness angle for the seating of 71.68 degrees, nearly twice the usual steepness of earthly stadium seating. With an angle like that, the Matoran would certainly have no issues seeing over the heads of the row in front, but more on that point later. The next step towards figuring out how many Matoran these seats could hold is to determine the actual size of the Matoran themselves, as that will directly affect how much space each one of them will take up in the stadium. For that, we are going to have to make some physical measurements here in the real world. A Metru build Matoran set is 12 cm tall, with a shoulder width of 6 cm, though their width expands to roughly 8.5 cm if we include their arms. By using the conversion factor of 10.95 used on this channel several times before for Metru scaled sets, that equates to an in-story height of around 1.31 meters, a shoulder width of around 0.66 meters, and a total width of around 0.93 meters. Given that stadium seating in our world is usually pretty tightly packed, and that these shots of the Matoran in this stadium show that this is also true on Metru Nui, let's say that each Matoran gets a seat 1 meter in width, giving them enough room to accommodate their full width of 0.93 meters with just a few centimeters on either side for basic comfort. Another key measure we need to know is the depth of each row. In human stadiums, the depth of rows is usually around 45 to 61 centimeters as standard, with this being roughly the minimum needed for an average size adult to be seated comfortably in. Matoran are a lot smaller than the average adult human, and have much shorter legs in comparison to their overall body size, but this is largely counteracted by the fact that they have much larger feet. Using those set measurements and conversions again, Matoran feet are around 44 centimeters long in story. As a quick aside, that is roughly similar to the foot size of Jason Hernandez, owner of the Guinness World Record for the largest feet in the world, with his coming in at 40.57 centimeters and needing a European size 69 shoe. Going back to the Matoran, aligning the set in a seated position shows that their back actually lines up with their heels when seated, so the room needed for seating would likely not need to be much larger than the length of their feet themselves. Because of this, I set the seat depth at 0.5 meters. Now that we have those measurements, we can apply them to the stadium. We already have the depth of the seating area in total as 114.59 meters. So, dividing that by our single row depth of 0.5 meters gives us our total number of rows, 229. We can also now take this row number and divide the height of the seating area by it to know how high above the previous row each next row is, which, thanks to that very high slope angle from earlier, gives us a sizable 1.5 meter rise per row. That's taller than the standing height of the Matoran at 1.3 meters. This does contradict the rise we see in Legends of Metru Nui, but the maths checks out from the other measurements made, so I'm happy with it. On the plus side though, it would mean that even if they were all standing rather than sitting, every spectator would still get a completely unobstructed view of the field. Now that we know the number of rows, we need to calculate the total length of those rows. Once we have that, we can just divide it by our allowed width per Matoran, and we will get our answer on the total capacity of the stadium, and therefore the population of the city. Each row forms a circle around the Aquilini field, with each one being slightly bigger than the last. The circumference of the closest row to the Aquilini field can be found using our earlier measurements, as we already know the radius of the field. We can therefore use this equation to find the circumference, which works out at being around 1,388 meters. As we know the radius of the whole stadium, we can do the same again to find out the circumference of the outermost row, which works out to be around 2,208 meters, or about 820 meters longer. Taking these two numbers and then dividing the difference between them by the number of rows, we can get the figure by which each row's circumference increases, about 3.58 meters. So now we take the length of row 1, add that figure to it, and we get the length of row 2. Repeat that for all 299 rows, and do a quick check to make sure that the final row length is the same as the outer circumference of the stadium calculated earlier, and there you have it, the full length of every row. Add them all together, and you find that the total length of the rows is around 413,436 meters. Or at least you would if you didn't take into account these dividers between the 6 seating areas. The dividers are most likely the stairways that give access to the seats themselves, and their width per row will need to be removed to get the true total length value of the seating. Luckily, we can use the same method to do this, by using pixel measures to find their sizes, performing the same steps as before, and removing their total length from that previous number. We get a true final length of the rows of 400,442 meters. And now, at long last, we can divide this number by our width of a single seat to get the number of Matoran. As it turns out, that is a pretty easy calculation, given that we assigned 1 meter of width per Matoran. So we actually have our number already. 400,442 Matoran can fit within the stadium, and therefore, by our logic, 400,442 Matoran lived within the city of Metru Nui. If we assume that the Matoran were divided up equally between the 6 Metru, that means there were 66,740 Matoran per element within the city. That number is still only around a third of the 1.3 million population of the similarly sized real-world city of Dallas, but I'd say it's a far more realistic number than both what we've previously calculated on this channel and what has been given as official numbers. But what do you think? Do you think this was a reasonable method for figuring out the population of the city? Or are there other methods you think could be used? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you all again soon for another Bionicle Science investigation here at the Knowledge Tower.